Take a moment to peek into the lives of inspirational people living the true definition of happiness with author, presenter, personal stylist and coach Moana Robinson, who chats to people who have overcome challenges to live their best life. Moana is a passion and purpose coach and a personal stylist who empowers others to discover their best life and style regardless of age. Here is Moana.
Welcome to Take a Moment, and I'm very excited today to be talking with Michelle Sleight, who is a fellow author. We've just been on a 10-year anniversary virtual party with the 48-hour author group. Yes. Michelle, I would love you to introduce yourself and tell the audience and the listeners what you are doing today. And we're going to be chatting about a challenge that you've had in your life and how you overcame that challenge and how you're now living your best life.
Yeah, great. Hi, everyone. And Moana, thank you so much. What a marvelous segment. I watch it, and it's great to be here as a participant. So thank you. And yes, we met at a fabulous author retreat. Moana's got two marvelous books. I recommend that you read them. They are beautifully written. I would say deliciously written. And you can really hear Moana's voice. So it's beautiful to read, easy to read, lovely. Yes. So my book here, and we'll be talking about my greatest challenge, which is really the basis of where I learned the information and got where I am to be able to write such a book in a way that's, I'm perfectly peaceful with that. So insight, up close and personal profile of sexual assault.
Now, what the title of your book, where did the word insight or the title insight come from?
So I really wanted this book to be an informative book, right? So that someone could pick it up and read it, and they would then have an actual empowered, I say empowered, what I'm meaning is that they have a foundation of knowledge that's going to work for them. It's going to give them something. And I got a call from someone just the other day who was halfway through my book and who was confronted after being at a funeral of all places. Yes, and she was staying at a caravan park in her camper and was confronted by someone who was about to assault her. And she started to feel herself go. Now, she's a fully trained social worker, right? She worked in prisons for most of her life. And she said, I just felt myself shutting down. And I just thought, what did Michelle say? And she was able to get herself out of that situation and get away. So I think that the whole idea is to give people an insight. I can't write everything in 40,000 words, but to introduce in a way that's really going to make a difference in your life, the basics, so that you have a foundation of knowledge that's actually accurate, because there's not very much out there that is. Mm. And that was really the purpose. The profile is my experience, and I've learnt a lot, not only from what we're going to talk about, and that was my challenge, but also I had the most unique opportunities to learn from sexual predators themselves while they were in the spaces where they were hunting new victims, they were grooming, they were setting things up, and I was able to watch and go up and talk to them and learn from them. Lots of different scenarios where I got to learn. I was inadvertently sitting in a booth, and the next booth along there was a network group of sexual predators, and I learned a lot. So I've accumulated all this information. I have put it to use in my own life. I've educated my children, and they have been able to rescue their friends and keep themselves safe. And so I thought, you know what, this could help other people. And in my life, I've found so many people struggling, some sitting in car parks with a bottle of pills. And I just don't think that's a good option. No one should get to that point, but sadly, we don't have the support systems in place to be able to help people who have experienced this in a way that gets rid of all the triggers and all the anxiety and all the PTSD and then they're able to live their best life. So the whole idea is to give people insight to begin to be able to feel that they've got control and some knowledge and understanding about what did happen to them or what could happen to them and what they can begin to do about that. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, that does give us an insight, and I like that it's an informative book, gives you insight. Surprisingly, not so much about the victims, but about the perpetrator, isn't it?
Well, it's about it's about the whole subject, right? So it's not just, I have one chapter that is my story, right? However, each chapter is written and it's about every aspect of sexual assault, because there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So it's not just the person that did it. It's not just the person that they did it to. It's the how that happened, the why that happened, and what can be done about that. Better understanding it gives a much better foundation of knowledge or perspective. And so something that wouldn't have meaning for someone suddenly now has a meaning. Do you know? So a lot of times sexual predators can often say something to people and they don't really understand what that is, and they just laugh it off because they don't understand it, right? And they dismiss it. However, after they've been assaulted, it suddenly makes sense to them that that person was telling them in a very roundabout way what they were going to do. Now, if you have a few insights into how all these pieces work, you can maybe remove yourself as a player from wherever someone's trying to slot you in.
Yeah.
Right? And perhaps when someone says something, you'll think, okay, maybe not. Maybe I won't, I won't go to that party, or I won't meet that person for coffee, or whatever it might be. Yeah.
Writing this book, obviously it probably would have been quite cathartic for you, was it?
No, it wasn't, because I was already in a different space.
The challenge that we're going to talk about now, is that since you've written the book, was it a challenge?
Okay, so that was the challenge, to be able to be alive here today.
Yeah.
Right. That was the challenge of surviving in a community, in family, in social environments, in school, in workplaces, with people who had no idea, who say hurtful things. There's a whole range of different things. And of course, the first time I was sexually assaulted, I was 5. Right. The last time I was actually sexually assaulted successfully, I was 32. And I was able, and it's the only assault that I was able to actually get into a court. Yeah. And that's terrible in itself. However, because of me actually being able to get to a different place, I was a different type of victim. And so I was a different type of witness. And I was able to communicate very clearly what had happened to me and what was actually being done. And so the person actually pled guilty right before the trial. Then we had a huge case around sentencing, because it was a precedent case, and it was around the amount of suffering that we as victims experience. So I had to fight for the legal right to have my pain recognised, and that of every other victim, of course. And that was a very intense time. Yeah. But again, I was a different victim. I had a language, and I had an ability to be able to communicate without being triggered. I could explain my trauma. And that isn't something that victims usually have, especially in a court setting. So it was very different.
And what was it that enabled you to overcome that challenge to become a different person or a different victim?
Yeah, so it's something that I talk about in my book. I was 5, and I told adults, I told people, and they didn't want to know. And that was confusing. And I was really angry about that, right? And I also had to hide so it didn't happen again from this person. There was a lot going on, and I had to watch him doing it to other children in front of adults. So I had a lot of questions, and I was really very angry. You know, and then at 8 years of age, it happened again, and the police let me down, and my family let me down, and you know, and all the way, then it happened again and again and again. But always I had questions, and always I tried to find answers. And I remember there was a moment in time, and I talk about it in my book, where I let my sister down, and I couldn't help her. And I thought something has to change, because I'm not going to live, you know, like I'm not living, and something's got to change. I can't continue to be the way I am. I'm not finding the answers, and perhaps I need to make a big change to be able to do that. Of course, I learned that even moving, you take your problems with you. So coming to Australia, although it took me away from where, you know, I'd been sexually assaulted many, many, many times, it still happened twice in the workplace, and then when I was 32 the last time. But what it did was it gave me a little bit of breathing space to be able to let go of the bulimia, and to be able to have a little bit more ability to be able to think, okay, what do I want to do? I want to do this. I want to do that. And even though there weren't coaches like there are today, like you and I are, and I began to work as a coach in a crystal shop. Once, though, I had got through my own journey to the point where I had the understanding and the resources to be able to help people. It's not enough to have a conversation with someone. And many people cannot admit to themselves everything that happened, right? They're struggling to even comprehend some of it. And a lot of therapies rely on you to be able to tell your therapist and be honest with them. But if you can't be honest with yourself, how on earth can you be honest with them? It was an interesting time. Louise Hayes had just released her book on affirmations, and there was some other books around, and it was all talking about this quantum physics and this journey back to yourself.
Yeah.
And I'd always lived like I felt I was in this tunnel, and I could see this little pinprick of light. And that was watching other people be happy and laugh. And you could see they actually felt the laughter physically, that their body had a change when they laughed. And we or even, you know, had no idea about what that would even feel like. But I just knew that maybe it was something that I wanted. And so as I began to look at meditation and read books and do things, that little tiny pinprick got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It started, a little bit more light came in, and I opened up my perspective to realizing that maybe I had to do this on my own. I was like on planet Mars. Everyone else was on planet Earth, and we just weren't speaking the same language. And that exists even today.
Yeah.
While people genuinely want to be helpful, if you've been to that place and then you have got to another place where you can be resourceful for people, it's impossible to have that link where you can actually help someone, really help them to be completely and utterly living their best life, right? And be past all that triggering and all of that pain.
You spoke about a sense of anger. Do you think that you utilize that feeling of anger in a positive way to give you some determination to do something?
I think so. Yeah. I think it was really, so there were so many times when I thought I just don't want to be here anymore. Right? Yeah. Like every day, several times a day. But I always thought, why should I be the one to not be here?
Yeah.
I didn't do anything wrong. So why should it be me that's suffering, right? And so that was always there. And I think that you're quite right, Moana. If we use our anger in the right way, it can drive us to look for the answers for the best possible outcome for us, whatever that might look like for us individually, right? And it's really important. And this was a huge challenge, but at the time, there were these resources surfacing and sort of coming out of the woodwork that I could get my hands on and begin to do that. And then I remember I ended up with a work-related injury, and I was in a point where I couldn't use my hands. I couldn't even put food in my mouth. I had to lick things. I had to learn how to use my feet to empty things into a plate to then be able to lick them like a dog or a cat, because my hands were so swollen and so painful that I couldn't use them. And I was very lucky, very, very lucky, because I got called into the workplace health and safety office, and I'm sitting there in this terrible, horrible corridor in the dark, and this lady came up to me, and it was like she was sent to me from the universe, and she gave me this warning about this medical legal doctor and about what he did and how he sexually assaulted the people that went to go and see this doctor. So I was forearmed, right?
Yeah.
This is the first, interestingly, I wasn't super empowered, but in a way I was, because it was a great opportunity for me to take something, in that I was sitting there and when he took his action and was pushing my head down towards his genitals, and I just said, I know what you're going to do, and if you do it, I'm going to bite it off, and he'd already grabbed my breasts and done different things, and I tried to get away, and then he was about to force his penis into my mouth. So anyway, I told him, I'm going to bite that off if you do that. And it was really like the shift of power. It was a moment I can really remember, like, yeah, hey, we can actually say no.
Yeah.
And it's not about whether or not they still assault us. It's about the fact that there is ways of maybe of stopping it, because then he stopped. He did scream and yell at me and throw me.
And so did you report it? Was that the one?
I did report it, and I was told by Balmain Police that it was a medical legal issue and nothing to do with them. So even though it was a criminal offence to sexually assault someone, which I had been, they just bowed out of it. I went and saw another medical legal doctor who had been coached by the insurance company that he was employed by to sexually assault. I was his first person. But I was a little bit different now, because I'd had this really interesting experience, which I analysed and worked through. So I was actually able to have a really interesting conversation with him about how he was taught to do this, to hurt me and other people like me. And I shamed him into actually perhaps finding a different course to go down. So that was quite interesting. But I remember getting home from that first doctor and sitting there, and I was followed by these insurance investigators, and I was hiding in my bedroom on the floor. And I was going, I don't want this. I don't want this. And then I heard this tiny little voice, and it was probably there all along, but I didn't hear it. But now I heard it, and it said, well, what do you want? And this is the essence of quantum physics and the power of it. And it's about where you put your focus. And I thought, yeah, well, I don't know. And it stopped me. And I had to think, what did I want? I knew what I didn't want, but I had no idea about where I wanted to go and what I wanted to have. And so I started writing it down, thinking about it, answering that question. And then I met someone on the same journey, different reason, and we pulled our resources and the skill sets that we have, which are quite unique, to help each other. And it was the most extraordinary experience of my life, other than my children, because I would I would do some little bit of work. I would go to sleep, I would wake up, and the world around me was different. Nothing had changed. I was still the same person. My expectation of how I would be received was different. And so the power of that energy of your thoughts and everything, and your beliefs and what you believed would happen and that sort of thing, enabled me to actually have a different outcome and to not have PTSD and to be completely trigger-free. I can sit here and talk about anything in detail.
Yep.
I'm mindful that not everybody in the audience can, but I certainly can. And I'm not uncomfortable about it. I understand that it had nothing to do with me. It was someone else's problem. And for years, I carried their problem until I found a way to give that problem back to them and live my life. Yeah.
So thank you, Michelle. If there's someone who's listening who has been through some of the experiences that you've been through, apart from buying your book and reading your book, and we'll put the details up with the notes, is there any advice, any simple piece of advice that you can give to people to take that power back for themselves, to think of what they do want and not what they don't want?
Exactly. There's a couple of little steps that are very, very helpful to begin to give you that opportunity to think a little outside of the pain and the trauma, whether it's domestic violence or sexual assault or significant bullying of some sort. They're all very traumatic. Firstly, is to accept that this happened simply not because it was your fault or that you did anything to contribute to bringing it on. It had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with you. And if we did have a true statistic, there would be more of us than there would be of people who have yet to be affected. We are the majority, probably not the minority. We just don't talk about it yet, to the point where we realise that probably our neighbours have been through this, the people that we work with have been through this, that we are really not alone, and this was nothing to do with us. To accept that it happened, we have to live with the fact that we know that any second of the day it could happen again, and of course it does for many of us, and in different ways. But to accept that it happened, and the reason, the person who did this, it's their problem. Yep. To acknowledge that it's their problem. Our responsibility is to ask, to say, hey, that was your crap. Yep. I didn't have any power at the time, but I do have the power now to say, okay, how is this going to look moving forward? It's like I learned to tie my shoelaces. How does that look moving forward? I learned to ride a bike. Okay, how does that change my life moving forward? Okay, this most horrific thing happened. What can I take from that that's going to benefit me the very most, and move forward with it? I think it's really important to remember that you have the right to ask that if you're working with somebody and they're not being helpful, for you to say, what you're doing isn't helpful, you need to find another way. Be honest, right? Too many of us end up as projected income on an income sheet for therapists. And I know that's a really, really, really horrible thing to say. But, if I work with somebody, I don't need to see them more than a few times, ever. Right? That's it. Every time we work together, we have a result. And I think that's being respectful. It's important that if you are seeing someone and you're looking for a way forward, make sure that that person can deliver. If they can't, it's not their fault. It just means you haven't found the right person yet.
And it's all the more important for you to know what you want, and then you know that you've got the result that you want.
That you're looking for.
Mm.
Absolutely. And if this person can't do it, it's like, okay, I respect that you're trying to help. However, it's not getting there for me, right? So who else could I see? I worked with a young girl in lockdown who reached out to me. I was on a group, and I was, helping with a lot of, it was a victims group. It was a great group. And she reached out to me, and she says, it was the lowest time in her life. She'd been to rehab twice. She was underweight on some significant drugs. She'd just wrapped a car around a tree. And she said, yeah, can we have a chat? And so we did. And then that motivated her to get to rehab. And then when she came out, we did some sessions. She ended up being able to then go into the police for the first time and get them to go and take an action and arrest him. And she went to court, and she said, my God, I sat there in that box. She said, everyone was bawling their eyes out. I just sat there calmly, and I explained everything that happened. And the only time that I cried, and she said, I just had a few tears, was when I talked about the damage that he did to my body. She said the judge was sobbing his guts out. But she said, I felt so empowered.
Yep.
Because I could take that opportunity and communicate and be heard. Yeah. We often can't be heard, and that's really frustrating and difficult. I had someone say to me, went and saw a therapist, and they read out this list of things that I should be feeling, but I wasn't feeling those. So all he did was trigger this person and alienate this person from therapists. It's important that we can say, excuse me, but I don't have those. This is my issue. But sometimes it's difficult to find that language. So taking a moment to just say, what do I want? Okay, is this person helping me get it? No? All right. So find another way. Find someone else. That's what I had to do until I found a place where I was confronted at the age of 48 by somebody. I was living in the Philippines as an expat. I was at an expat party. There was an expat that broke into the toilet. So I've got my little laces around my ankles. I'm not going anywhere. And I said, he was there, and he was going to rape me. And I said, very calmly, okay, I get it. You're here to rape me. I accept that. But here's the thing I want you to know. There's going to be blood. There's going to be evidence that I didn't want this. And I am going to tell everyone what you did. And he stopped. And I remember him looking at me. And again, you can feel that balance of power, empowerment changing and shifting, because he had never come up against someone like me. I did not respond in the way in which he expected, right?
Yeah.
Now, that's where we should all be, and we can all be, right? So there is a before, a middle, and an after.
Yep.
The during, the middle, which that is something where freeze, flight, and fight take care of it, which is a natural thing here. But there are skills and resources we can develop before to perhaps prevent. Like that lady who got halfway through my book was able to pull herself back and say, what did I read? What did Michelle say? And then there's the after, because we need to have a plan for what we do after.
And you're at the after now, aren't you? You're at the after, and you've been able to write this book, share it with other people. Yeah. Can you tell the listeners and the viewers what it is that you do now? Do you work remotely online or face-to-face?
I do both.
Yep.
I'm going to Paris as a keynote speaker for International Women's Day, where I'll be talking about this subject. Yep. And I think it's important that we talk about this subject because it's not being talked about in the right way. And I say that because it's not our voice.
Yeah.
right? So people are assuming that they know things and it's not correct. So I'm really excited about that. But so I'm available online to do Zooms, which is how I help that young girl. My book, I'm looking to be running some workshops for parents, but also working with people. I do work one-on-one, but I'm happy to do it on Zoom or in person to be able to give people the resources to be able to have a different outcome. That's, I don't need people to tell me about their experience to be able to help them.
Yeah. And you've also been a participant in the Teen Girls Workshop.
Yes, we did. Yes. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
In fact, I had someone reach out and ask when we're doing the next one.
Yes. We'll have to hold another one. Michelle, I really, really appreciate you coming online today. And 3 questions that I do like to sort of focus on is someone to love, something meaningful to do, and something to look forward to. You've obviously got 2 beautiful daughters and a wonderful husband.
To love, it has to be yourself first.
Yes.
That may sound a little bit weird, but really understanding self-love enables you to have really, really fabulous relationships with other people. Because if you can love yourself, it means that you can be respectful and resourceful for yourself, and it attracts other people. So self-love.
Yes, and something meaningful to do.
To listen to that little voice, that was a tiny little voice that said, well, what do you want? To be allowed to enable yourself to think, well, what is my purpose? What excites me, right? Me helping people in this way excites me because I've been able to teach my children and they've used it to help others, right? I know the value of it and I'm excited about it. What excites people? That's exciting, whatever it is. That's great. Yeah. And what was the third one?
The third one is something to look forward to. So you've got your trip to Paris coming up with that wonderful talk that you're going to be giving.
Yes, and it's also each and every person that I come in contact with where I can share something with them. And it's a two-way street because I'm always learning from people as well as sharing with them. Yeah. And it's inspiring. People who I talk to who have been in that place that I'm in, that, let's face it, you're never not that person that experiences that. But it's extraordinary. People, we victims, and I wear that like a badge of honor. We forget to celebrate how amazing we are that we are alive and that we are living in this world and contributing in some way, shape or form. And I remember saying to little Abby, be grateful to yourself that like the drugs kept you alive until you could find a way to stay alive without them. And that totally changed her perspective because she was I hate myself for taking them. And I said, perhaps you didn't have any other resources.
Yeah.
So remember to celebrate how amazing you are. And perhaps you might say, I'm not coping with this the best that I could be, but you're coping with it. Oh, my God. That's inspiring.
Yes,
that's something so special. Remember to go take yourself to a coffee shop if you're having a really low moment, right? Buy a little something that you like, have a cuppa or a cup of tea, cup of coffee, and sit there for a moment and think, yeah, cheers to me.
Yes.
Wow. I'm living with that.
Yeah.
I'm extraordinary. Oh, my gosh. Think about that before you go to sleep. I'm extraordinary. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Really, really appreciate your time today. And I will be sharing all those links, sharing your book, how to get your book, your website. You've got a website, haven't you?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll be sharing all those links. And thank you so much for taking a moment with me.
Moana, thank you for having me and this wonderful segment that you do with so many interesting people. Thank you. And thank you to everyone that's listened. I hope that in some way I've given you something. Yes. All the best.
Sure you have. I'm sure you have.
Thank you for listening to Take a Moment with Moana Robinson. Remember to visit her website, bestyledforlife.com.au, and book a time for a further conversation.